We're now going to let Serge take over and give his personal story.
If you haven't walked out that door, please don't. You might want to hear what I have to say. Unfortunately, I'm last up, but sometimes, you know, it ends in a good note. Anyways, my name's Serge Vaillancourt. I'm 6 years post-liver transplant, and I've got a number of agendas that are all relative to everybody in this room. It will touch you in one way or another, I guarantee it. Now, it does pay to advertise, so over and above the little name tag that says Give Life, I am 6 years post-liver transplant. Anyways, look, I'm alive today because I'm the type of person who just, I want answers. I found out I had Hep C after I had nosebleeds that nobody could tell me what it was like or what it was about. Finally, I ended up back in probably 90, oh, no, I'm jumping ahead here. Nobody's laughed yet, so here's a good one. I always talk to my surgeon. He did such a wonderful job on the liver. I wish he'd tweak a little something up here because I get so forgetful sometimes. Anyways, in about 2003, I experienced what I thought was the end of the world. I got up off my chair and I almost fainted, and it was like, wow. I went to the doctor, and lo and behold, I got high blood pressure. So she tells me, she says, oh, don't worry about that. At your age, it's common, and here's a prescription for blood pressure medication. Well, I just wasn't comfortable with that. I wanted to know why. I'm one of the people who has high blood pressure, so I demanded some answer. I said, I want to know why. So she did some blood work, and lo and behold, my liver enzymes are out of whack. And then further blood work, we find out I've got Hep C. And then as a result of that, I am sent to see a Dr. Mahoney in Campbell River, who I credit for saving my life. Excuse me, it's a woman's liver. I get so emotional sometimes. That usually generates laughter, but anyways, through the process of being diagnosed and finding out just how severely infected I was, I had a liver biopsy. And Dr. Mahoney also scoped me, which if you've got Hep C and your doctor hasn't recommended you get this procedure, please talk to them about that, because I was scoped, and what happens, your liver gets plugged up, the blood won't go through, the blood pressure backs up, and you get what they call varices, which is the same as varicose veins, but in your throat. So you're unaware of this condition, unless you're fortunate enough to have asked the right questions and been directed to someone who looks into it for you. So I was scoped, I believe it was 3 times, and I had about a dozen varices banded, which they go down with a tube and they put a little ring around it and basically choke it off, and the scar tissue is stronger than the piece that falls off. For, you know, that's layman's terms. But Dr. Mahoney told me about the second time, he said, look, Serge, he says, you know, he says, in a perfect world, we'd be able to do this on a regular basis, and you shouldn't have to worry, because we can deal with the varices. But you've had repeated banding, and there's a distinct possibility that you might experience a varices bleed, in which case it's not necessarily fatal, but what you need to do is you need to get yourself to a hospital, and don't exert any energy or you'll just bleed to death. Well, guess what? Wasn't very long after that little tidbit of information that I'm playing Risk with my kids. I've got young kids too. And you know how frustrating that can get. I can't really blame them, but somehow or other I ended up getting just worked right up. It was time for bed, and the game was lasting, and anyways, finally they went to bed, and I go upstairs. I'm going to go to bed, and I just wasn't feeling right. There was something wrong. I had the chills. I just I get back out of bed. I go downstairs, and then I just can't pin it down. I'm just antsy, and what the heck is going on? I go back upstairs. My wife says, "Are you okay?" Being macho man here. Yeah, I'm fine. And lo and behold, no sooner did I say that, I just about collapsed on the bed, and I had to get up, and I threw up. I mean, without a word of a lie, the floor, the wall, covered in blood. There was little chunks of coagulated blood, and I just said to my wife, "Call 911. I remember what Dr. I remember what Dr. Mahoney said, and thank God for small miracles. I was able to just chill. I didn't panic. I told my wife to bring a blanket, of all things, and and she also called a friend of mine who was a first aid attendant at work, and she got there before the ambulance. And anyways, I said to him, I says, "Get me ready for transport and bring it." And they brought a blanket. I literally rolled onto the blanket, not to exert any energy, so they could get me that much close. I only had one thing in mind, and that's get to the hospital and don't panic, just chill. And, and I'm sharing this because unfortunately it might happen to one of you guys. And I'm living proof that you can survive it. But you're not going to do it if you don't know what's coming at you, and you don't know what how you can deal with it. Statistically, 50% of people who have that happen to them in the city here will die. I live in Port McNeill. 18 and a half hours later, I'm in the hospital down here. Lost half my blood supply, and here I am to talk about it. So, and there's been, I'll be all over the place, but I'll try to be quick. We've been talking about funding and money for dealing with this, with treating Hep C and the criteria. And unfortunately, no politicians have showed up here, even though I called a number of MLAs and got all kinds of answers about we've got another appointment. Nobody seemed to care. So maybe we can take a little bit of time to blast them and let them know that we're definitely not happy with their lack of compassion, lack of understanding the magnitude of this. There was discussion about early detection and testing for Hep C. Had this happened, I could have been treated. But we didn't know until it was too late, so I ended up with a liver transplant. And the cost of that, and the cost of being in and out of the hospital, it's got to be far greater than the cost of having treated me. Mind you, back in '02, maybe treatment wasn't all that great, but now, with the success rate being so much greater, there's a much stronger argument for we need to treat these people, because the alternative, it's like we're living on borrowed money, and the interest rate is through the roof. There's no avoiding having to deal with this problem, and there's nobody immune to it. You can contract Hep C being a totally innocent, pious person, or, look, in 1998, at work, I shattered my ankle. I ended up in the hospital, and I had to look up the date. Here's an X-ray. You can see all the pins and plates in there. Well, guess what? I'm not looking for sympathy because they're out of there now. I had 2 operations, one to put them in, one to take them out. But my point is, I had been to the doctor about the nosebleeds. They could have clued in. They weren't aware of it. I had these surgeries. and very good people that try and save lives and other, as well as other things, were subjected to handling contaminated blood, whereas they should have known. You know, I do blood work all the time after the transplant, and even before then, I make a point of telling whoever draws the blood, I'm Hep C positive. And you'd be amazed at how many times after I say that, oh, they put on a glove. Not that that's going to save them, but it's still a precautionary measure. And it's that, yeah, I wish he'd tweak something up here. But anyways, so the important things that I wanted to say as far as the progression of the disease is warn you about the varices bleed. I've experienced ascites. I can be sympathetic to pregnant women. My God, trust me, I was, you know, I couldn't bend that, and I was in pain. I cramping. I couldn't sleep. I was vomiting. I was in and out of the hospital for days on end, probably every couple of months for 2 years before I had the transplant. Now, I have young kids. I'm very fortunate. My wife is 16 years younger than I am. And I've got my son just graduated from high school with honor. And my daughter's doing well in school. And I can only question as to what their life would have been like had I passed away 6 years ago. That's a cost that you can't put value on that. It's a woman's liver, I tell you. Cell memory, maybe that's what. Anyways, I'm just glad that I can feel the way that I do. I really don't care. To watch a grown man cry, well, I have at it. I'm glad that I have those feelings. I do get so sidetracked. One of the things that I do is I started out after the transplant being an advocate for organ donation, and I set up registration drives. And speaking of my son, the first time I did a registration drive, I got this box, and I'm going to go set up in the mall, at the same mall, a cute little store. Am I okay for time?
About 2 minutes.
My wife said, take Ashley to see the Santa Claus. Okay, I can drive. I'm skinny as a rail, whatever. Santa's little helper says, come on, sweetheart. She goes up there, and then she's sitting on his knee, and then he says to me, he says, come on, Dad. I weigh all of 115 pounds. What have I got to lose? I go sit on the other side, and he say, what would you like for Christmas, little girl? And he asks, and she starts out, oh, you don't have to tell Santa what you want, little girl. He knows what little girls like. And he says to her, you be a good little girl. There'd be lots of presents under the tree, and gives her a candy cane. I'm thinking, what a cool Santa. And then he turns to me, and he says, how about you, Dad? What would you like for Christmas? Well, I couldn't help it. You wouldn't happen to have a spare liver, would you? He says to me, he says, I'll see what I can do. Well, December 29th, I got a transplant. So there is hope. After the transplant, I became an advocate for organ donation. That's why these little things that you found on your seat, one of them was done by Czech News, and the other one by Shaw Cable. I urge you to please check those out, send it to family and friends. It also talks about giving blood, because I was contacted by Canadian Blood Services regarding speaking to blood donors because of the significant amount of blood that was used for my transplant. Mind you, if you're Hep C positive, you can't give blood, but you can register as organ donors. That's a completely different thing. They can match you to someone else. And in all sincerity, I don't want any of you guys to become organ donors, because that means a tragedy has occurred. But if it's going to happen, please take the time. The opportunity is now. Fill that up. That little box there is going to be at the back. And they'll be hand-delivered, because I'm going to the transplant clinic on Monday, and it can make a difference. I told you I could speak for hours, but...
We know that. Thank you.
Anyways, look, thank you very much for listening, and hopefully I said something that, that you find helpful as far as the progression of the disease, what you need to know, and thank you.
Have a seat, sir. So there truly is a Santa. So maybe the next Premier of British Columbia will be Santa Claus.